So the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, they say, well, he's just talking. Man, if you don't talk and get it right, you won't know what to do. You just get up and be doing stuff. We got a lot of folks doing stuff and we still not getting anywhere. Look like we need to sit down and have a real conversation about what we're doing, what we need to do so that we can get beyond where we are right now. We got generations of black folks that have grown up that don't know that the average corner store in our neighborhoods used to be black owned. You think it's always been that somebody from another country has always had store. It ain't been like that. This is a recent development since the 70s when the Arabs started coming in first. We're like the carcass that laid there where the eagles have gathered. Carcass, everybody done got a bite out of it. So the Arabs been here, they got an economic bite. The Koreans got here, they took a bite. The Dominicans are here, they taking their bite. That's a carcass. And the eagle has gathered, is that right? The eagle is the bald eagle. That's the symbol of the United States. That ain't never happened over in Judea. All of that happened right here in these United States of America. It was a prophetic utterance by Jesus at that time. So I hope you'll open your ears, but more important that you'll open your minds and your hearts. To our guest speaker from Memphis, Tennessee today, I mean, he's right there from the Bible Belt. Great brother and helper to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. We'll have plenty of material for you when we finish today. Please put your hands together for Brother Student Minister Demetric Muhammad from Memphis, Tennessee, Mosque number 55 in these United States of America. Go ahead, right there. All right, good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Yes, sir.
Assalamu alaikum. In the most holy name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness that there is no God except Allah. And I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. And I bear witness that Allah appeared to us in the person of the great Mahdi, Master Fard Muhammad. And we thank Allah over and over again for raising among us, you and me, his beloved black man and woman of America, his messenger Messiah to us and really to the whole human family, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. And we are thankful and grateful to the Almighty God for the man that is his representative among us today and really is the voice of God in the world today. He is an extension of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. There is really no such thing to say that you love Elijah and you don't love Farrakhan. He is the second self. He is the spirit. He is the embodiment of what Allah first gave to the black man and woman of America in the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He is our big brother. He is our friend. He is our defender. He is our teacher. He's a guide for us. And most importantly, he is an example for us of the kind of human being we must all strive to be like if we want to find the favor of God. So, beloved brothers and sisters, allow me to greet you once again. Assalamu alaikum. Allow me to first of all thank Almighty God, Allah, for blessing us to be here in the Delaware Valley in the city of Philadelphia this weekend. I want to thank the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan for his permission to travel and to engage with our people, to speak in the mosques and study groups, and for his guidance and his love and his embrace of a young man that, as Minister Rodney was just introducing me, comes from way down south. A lot of us in this room have not been down south perhaps since our grandparents were down south. So I'm like your long-lost cousin, coming all the way up here in the big city. But I thank the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan for his love, guidance, and for his permission, because we don't take what we are embarking upon lightly. We are coming before the men and the women of God. We are taught that God came 9,000 miles to save us. He left a righteous environment. He left a holy environment. He put on dyed garments to come for you and me in our savage condition. So whenever we come before the people of God, we always come humble. We always come reverential. We always come respectful. Fact about it, we say that when we go out and we're selling our Final Call newspaper and we're engaging with our brothers and sisters in their condition in the streets, in the hoods, the highways, and the byways, that's really our form of worship of God. So I'm in here today to serve the people of God. We pray with a timely message. I have to also thank my big brother and friend, a mentor to me, a brother that has meant a lot in my growth and development. He is the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's Delaware Valley Regional Representative, Student Minister Rodney Muhammad. And I want to thank all of the believers and the laborers and officials here at Mosque number 12. It's been a minute since I've been here, but it's always like coming back home. And I see so many brothers and sisters that have encouraged me, have nurtured me, have offered a kind word, have supported us in the projects and efforts that we have done to help the minister and to help our people. We were here in this area this weekend at the invitation of Sister Dr. Safiya Muhammad and Sister Camila Mukmin Rashad of the Black Muslim Psychology Conference. And it was a wonderful 2-day event at Chestnut Hill College where we discussed the wellness of the believing men and women and begin to strategize on better ways to be of service to the believing men and women. Whenever I read the Holy Quran, there are many different types or characters that are identified. But the one character or the one type or the one role that is always identified as the favor of Allah is the believer. I mean, you have the chiefs and the leaders of the people, you have devils, you have jinn, you have angels, you even have the prophets and the messengers of God. But Allah's promise is always to the believers and those who believe and do good. So we were studying and conferring and seeking to improve our quality of service to the believing men and women. And so today our subject, we're not going to tarry, but I'm thankful to everyone that afforded me the opportunity and helped make it possible for us to be here today. And I'm thankful to each and every one of you for coming out, for those that invited guests, family members, and friends. I thank you. We always feel that as students of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teachings, as students of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, that religion has to be made relevant to the condition of the people. Would you agree? I mean, we could stand up here today and talk about things that happened 1,400 years ago or things that happened 2,000 years ago. But if it doesn't have a direct bearing on your life and on my life, right here in the city of Philadelphia, we could just deem it as an academic exercise, kind of an intellectual feel-good moment. We went into the archives of history, but we didn't receive anything that would help us today. And so as they say in the church, God is always on time. So we think that this message is a timely message that we want to speak into, because I don't know about you, but every day is a difficult day to awaken and read about or learn about another black man or black woman or black child that has been the victim of police brutality and the victim of police homicide. Yet there is to be a proper relationship between the black community that needs to be safeguarded and protected and law enforcement. And so we want to speak into this subject because as we were doing some research for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, we came across words from his teacher, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, directly giving guidance to blacks in law enforcement. And I would just say, you know, whenever we are blessed to be with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in a setting where we are preparing and working to research, the number one priority for Minister Farrakhan, for those who do not know in this regard, is what did his teacher have to say about the subject? That's his number one consideration. So he starts from his teacher, then he moves from his teacher and finds within the world witness bearers for what his teacher already gave to us. So don't get it twisted. It's always research following revelation and not the other way around. Revelation is first, and it is the spark. It is the root and the seed for inquiring men and women to search in Allah's creation to find the confirmation for what Allah already revealed. So we're happy today not to bring you what Brother Demetric necessarily has to say about policing the black community, because I'm not a police officer. I don't work in law enforcement. But you have to forgive me, because when you're a student of a great teacher, you kind of feel like you can weigh in on any subject, especially if you have your teacher's words. So I'm going to weigh in on this subject today. So our subject is how to police the black community, divine guidance from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So again, we want to start with the spiritual and then move into the physical. One verse from the scriptures that is very helpful and I like in this regard comes from the 127th Psalms. It says, a song for pilgrims ascending to Jerusalem, a psalm of Solomon. Unless the Lord builds a house, the work of the builders is wasted. Unless the Lord protects a city, guarding it with sentries will do no good. So essentially we see that there is a way to protect a city that is divine in nature, especially if you are protecting and policing the people of God. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, in his first article entitled The Black Policeman and What He Polices, one of the things that you'll find is that these words were written in 1968. But if I didn't tell you that, you would think they were written in 2016 because they fit today's conditions perfectly. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad says the injustice done to the black man and his community by the Police Officers Commission, by white police officials and the city's mayor has come to the point where if the city government, county government, state government, and the USA government in general do not do something to correct this injustice, we are going to have one of the worst involutions that black and white ever have witnessed. He put in parentheses, one or the other will be lost. So this conflict between the black community and law enforcement was deemed by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad to be of vital importance. Yet you and I have suffered to hear from many people weighing in on this subject. We've heard from many different commentators, analysts, so-called leaders, and activists, but very few have advanced the viewpoint of God. So we want to make an attempt today to advance the viewpoint of God, understanding that God doesn't just speak from a loudspeaker from up in the clouds. Hello, somebody. He always speaks through his prophets and his messengers. And I'm in Muhammad's Mosque number 12, so I don't have to argue that these two men are messengers from God. I don't have to make that case, do I? I can make it. I'm prepared to make it. But I feel like I'm at home and I don't have to make this case. So we give an overview of the problem, how to police in the black community. Now, I don't know if you all have ever heard of the ADL. Y'all ever heard of the ADL? The Anti-Black League, the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith. Did you know that since 9/11, they have been actively involved in training your police officers? Now you may say, Brother Demetric, so what? I never even heard of the ADL before. Well, as you might expect, I'm going to show you why you should be concerned. Members of the American law enforcement community are being trained in Israel, where human rights violations by police and Israeli defense forces are a matter of policy under Israel's morally bankrupt apartheid political system. The ADL has brought 15 law enforcement executives from across the United States to Israel from April 9/17 to learn how Israel's police, intelligence, and security forces prevent terror attacks. Now, why, if you policing in the hood, you need to go to Israel to learn anti-terrorism techniques? I mean, last time I checked, we didn't have too many terrorist attacks in the hood. But yet, the ADL, a group with a long history of hatred and sabotage and conspiring against black leaders and black organizations, now is taking the police top brass to Israel to learn how to police among you and I. Now, in case you haven't watched the news lately, the way the Israelis police the Palestinians is not very humane. In fact, former President Jimmy Carter considered the conditions that the Palestinians live under to be worse than when you had apartheid in South Africa. Some of the cities that have been on some of this training include the police top brass from New York, from Philadelphia, Houston, Dallas, Atlantic City, many cities. One of these programs is called the LEAP program, the Law Enforcement Exchange Program. And this program, according to the definition, LEAP brings captains, lieutenants, police directors, sheriffs. They literally go to Israel. Says the LEAP trips to Israel. LEAP takes delegations of senior law enforcement executives to Israel to study methods and observe techniques used in preventing and reacting to acts of terrorism. They are now referring to Israel as the Harvard of anti-terrorism. And the D.C. police commander, Kathy Lanier, she said, no experience in my life has had more of an impact on doing my job than going to Israel. So they're not just going to a seminar. Like sometimes you go to a seminar, you forget what you learned. But they're saying when they go, they are impacted so deeply that what they learned there, they feel compelled to come back and implement as they police in the hood. Again, President Carter, describing in his book, Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid, that what the Palestinians are going through is worse than what the Africans even went through in South Africa. Now that may be his opinion, but he was moved because they even have certain roads that are very nice paved highways, but you can't ride on those roads unless you're an Israeli. Then they have another road that may be made of gravel or dirt. That's identified as a Palestinian road. I don't know if they have this in Philadelphia, but in many cities around the country, there is an Israeli form of martial arts that's becoming popular. You know, every few years, a certain type of martial art will become popular. Back when Jean-Claude Van Damme was big in the movies, I think he was a Aikido master, if I'm not mistaken. And then when Bruce Lee was popular, you had karate or kung fu. And so, you know, there are these trends in martial arts. Well, now there's an Israeli martial art known as Krav Maga. They have Krav Maga studios that claim to teach the public, the common citizen, how to defend themselves. A lot of sisters end up going and taking Krav Maga. But Krav Maga is a martial arts that was developed in Israel. Now, what's intriguing about Krav Maga, this is the definition of it. It said Krav Maga is the official hand-to-hand combat system of Israeli Defense Forces. Krav Maga prides itself on being a practical, easy to understand way to defend yourself in the face of imminent danger. Krav Maga owner and instructor Gabby Gilksmanson, he describes this technique called the carotid restraint. Now, you know, they have a regular chokehold where the idea is to kind of close off air coming into a person. But in Krav Maga, they have this thing called a carotid restraint that's literally designed to choke off your carotid artery to keep blood from going back and forth to the brain. Now, that may not mean a lot to you until you reflect upon what happened to our brother Eric Garner. And I already showed you that the New York officials have received this training, this impactful training, this training that they felt compelled to bring back and implement. So our brother ends up saying, I think 11 times, I can't breathe. See, so not only was New York officials there, but the Baton Rouge police officials. Chief Dabney went to Israel to learn anti-terrorism techniques. Do you remember in the early 90s, beloved brothers and sisters, when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan alerted us to some information he had received, that when the Cold War ended, they were now bringing back the old Cold War spies and putting them in the black community to work among the so-called gangs. See? Because there are those at the top of the power hierarchy in this country that view black life in America as terrorists. So they don't really see a conflict in what the Palestinians are doing with Palestinians, even though they're in a political conflict. They're fighting over land and territory. We're not fighting over land and territory in America, even though we need land and we certainly need territory, but that's not the status on the ground. That's not a concern of those in law enforcement. Not only did Baton Rouge and New York police officials receive this kind of training, but also Officer Eric Casebolt, who manhandled our little sister down in McKinney, Texas, who was just trying to have fun at a pool party in her community. He's also a Krav Maga expert. See? St. Louis, of course, which right down the street, Ferguson being a suburb of St. Louis, their officials. We were there last week and we debuted this subject in St. Louis last week, right down the street at Mosque number 28, about 8 blocks from where Michael Brown was murdered. Their officials have received that training. So do you see any kind of connection? That in cities where their police leaders received Israeli ADL-sponsored and facilitated training, police are learning how not to serve and protect, not how to negotiate, not how to de-escalate. See, there's a difference between a police officer and a soldier in a military. Soldiers are not necessarily trained in negotiation, because the only reason powerful rulers of nations put boots on the ground is because the talking phase is over. Negotiations have failed. So now we put boots on the ground, and the soldier's instructions is to take out targets. So the fact that police are learning from a military apparatus should concern you and I. Again, St. Louis, every city almost where there has been a popular case of police brutality or police homicide, we can trace back the training through the ADL. You remember the ADL because their former leader, Abraham Foxman, he built a career and became rich by telling Jews that Minister Farrakhan was a boogeyman that he needed to protect them from. And then he rode off into the sunset with his 6-figure salary on to the next post. Can you imagine that, brothers and sisters? A man was paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to create propaganda and to seek to destroy the reputation of Minister Louis Farrakhan, to seek to demagnetize him because they saw you and I were being drawn to him. But they didn't just start with the minister. They have a long, ugly history that I need to take a whole session just to point out to you these people that have made you and I believe that they are our friends. But they are not our friends. The Quran says of the people of the book, some English translations say it like this, and the Jews knew the Messiah like they knew their own son. Yet the record is clear. They went on to help to crucify the Messiah. Even though they had an intimate knowledge of him as a father has of his son, they knew he was the one, but yet they worked to destroy him. The Anti-Defamation League, they honored. I want you to think about something. If you want to know what this group thinks about the black community, not a year after Michael Brown was murdered, they honored the police in the St. Louis area. Black community still mourning. That's still an open wound. The world saw our young brother lying in the streets like an animal. They wouldn't even cover his body and give him any dignity. And then white people around the country raised $400,000 for the officer that killed him. And yet the ADL would honor the law enforcement agencies that were involved in that. So let me go back for just a second and say this, make this point. See, if the ADL, a group that has a documented history of hatred for black people, can be trusted, relied upon, and expected to facilitate police training, then I boldly declare that the Nation of Islam should be given the opportunity to give training to law enforcement officials and agencies all over the country. And I'm going to show you why. We have a track record among our people. We understand a fundamental truth about our people. We were taught when you come into the nation, we come as students, and so every student has to enroll and receive some lessons. And the first one we are given is a question, who is the original man? See, we are taught who the black man and woman of America really is, because in order to work among us, you have to know who we used to be before we fell into a savage state of affairs. Otherwise, you'll think that the savage acting black man, the savage acting, self-hating black man and woman is who we are by nature. So as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has taught us, beloved brothers and sisters, you are not your condition. I'm going to say that again. You and I are not our condition. I go to the Quran just to prove it before I move on. The Holy Quran, Surah 30, Ayat 30, set thy face for religion, being upright, the nature made by Allah, in which he has created men. And there is no altering Allah's creation. Now the first part of that ayat makes it clear that the nature of the human being is upright. Now, in the world of religious studies, that contrasts against the Christian worldview, where you have this idea of original sin, and that the human being is by nature sinful, and that religion intervenes into the life of man to fix his problem. From the Islamic worldview, man and woman are righteous by nature. And so Allah raises prophets and messengers to tap into, to touch, to speak to feed, and to grow his essence that's inside of us. But the most important part of that ayat to me, in my humble view, is the last part. Because it says there is no altering Allah's creation. In other words, I don't care what has happened to you. I don't care what of sin or wickedness you have done. You still are possessed of a righteous essence. And if we can touch that and feed it, that will grow. All praises due to Allah. That's the reason why we teach. That's the reason why we preach. We are speaking to the essence of Allah God in the hearer of his word. And we are seeking to feed that essence, because whatever you feed will grow. Whatever you starve will atrophy and wither and ultimately die.
And when we look at the black community today, we're just looking at a community of people where the Spirit of God is buried under a life of sin and rebellion. All praise is due to Allah. So we would begin with lesson number 1 for law enforcement officials. If you're going to police in the hood, who are the people you policing? You can't police the people and you don't know who the people are. And if you really want to know who black people are, you got to consult Mr. Elijah Muhammad. All praise is due to Allah. The Bible says this: I am God, also from ancient days I am the one. And there's no one who can deliver out of my hand when I act. Who can reverse it? In Daniel, he says, I kept on watching until the Ancient of Days was seated. His clothes were white like snow, and the hair on his head was like pure wool. His throne burned with flaming fire, and its wheels burned with fire. Emphasis on ancient. 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 Now, there's a such thing as being old. But if you're ancient, you're older than old. And the scriptures describes God as the Ancient of Days. It says he's the Alpha, meaning he's the first. He's the Omega, he's the last. Well, if God is the most ancient and he created a man in ancient times, what kind of man did he create? What kind of woman did he create? Who are the men and women who are directly from God? Well, it stands to reason we will have to find the most ancient men and women. Right. Many years ago, back in the 60s, the great archaeologist Richard Leakey was interviewed in Muhammad Speaks newspaper. He is the one that found the one that the anthropologists would call Zinjanthropus. Zinj meaning black, anthropus meaning man. See, when archaeologists, they're looking for the origin of man, they're looking for the origin of life. They might start in Europe, but they don't stay there. Ultimately, their search is rewarded by their findings in Africa. And so they have found remains of black men and women that are hundreds of thousands of years old. One man said he found 19 million year old bones of a black man in Kenya. I said that's fascinating because that 19 is a real good number. So you and I been around here for a long time. We are an ancient people. Do you know what that means in connection to law enforcement, brothers and sisters? It means that if there ever was a legal system, a legal code, a system of jurisprudence, it originated with you and me. They want to throw around this idea and this concept that the black community does not like law and order, does not like an orderly society, that we don't want to follow any rules and any instructions. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us that it was our original black fathers that taught law and order and civilization to the Caucasian. Y'all ain't forgot the history of the Caucasian, have you? Yeah, he likes to be in front of the microphone in a suit and a tie. He put on a black suit and a blue suit because the original businessmen of the world were black men. So he's putting your skin on in his business attire. But he wants to make the world to think that he's such a law-abiding man. He's a law-abiding people, and these black people, they're savages, they're animals, they're brutes. But it's you and I that gave him law. I don't care if you go and look at the ancient legal codes of Africa and Asia. Those were your and my people. So we gave to the European. We gave to the Caucasian. We taught him how to govern his own affairs. We taught him how to be civilized. 4,000 years ago, they didn't look like what they look like today. I know y'all like Kanye and Kim Kardashian, and sisters, y'all like Brad Pitt and all this kind of stuff, but they didn't look like that 4,000 years ago. Just here to tell you, they used to eat the bark of trees.
They used to eat raw flesh. They even cohabitated with animals. That's the reason why it's recorded in Musa's instructions to them in the Bible. Don't lie down with animals. That was them before they were civilized and brought under a divine law that you gave them. So you are the original giver of law and order and systems of justice in the earth where people can live in a civilized and orderly fashion. Again, you've been around here millions of years, but they only been around here for a short period of time. And I get so tickled whenever I see this kind of research. Because university level research, there's endowments and foundations that invest millions of dollars to ultimately arrive at certain conclusions. And they have now at the University of Chicago said that the origin of white skin and blue eyes is about 6,600 years old. I said 6,600 years old. And the reason why you smiling is because you tickle like I am, that it took them millions of dollars of research to ultimately conclude what the most honorable Elijah Muhammad has been teaching for many, many years. We could have given them a little small book, cost about $7, Message to the Black Man. So police need to understand that to police the black community is to police the men and women of God. David said it like this: you are all God's children of the Most High God. But in our condition, we are potentially God's. We are people with God's nature. But we have to be resurrected from what happened to us all these many years, being a stranger in a strange land among an evil and wicked oppressor. So essentially, the police in the black community, the question is, how do you police fallen gods?